Good morning and welcome to Little by Little, a short time in God's Word. Happy New Year. Hope the year started off well for you. Have you started a Bible reading plan? Check out our website, calvarypa.org, under the Watch tab for one of many different kinds of read through the Bible plans. Just that discipline of being in the Bible every day is something that will pay dividends in your life, not only now, but for years to come as you continue to dive into God's Word little by little. It's Monday, and so we're going to get back to our habit of previous months, prior to December, of going over the message that was from Calvary Chapel, Port Angeles. So this past Sunday, we started a new book with this new year. We started into the book of Esther. A fascinating book that is not often talked about other than maybe a little bit, in chapter 4 because of Esther's ultimatum that Mordecai says, for such a time as this. But we're going to go through the whole book, and what we are going to notice, we talked today about the fact that God's not mentioned in the book, but that God's all over the book. And that's the providence of God. God's sovereignty is over all. He's in control, but it's not always up front in your face. But He's actively working in and through the decisions that people make, those that love Him and those that don't, to accomplish His purposes and His will. So, here we go. Esther chapter 1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. Well, he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. When these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. Drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. So we have the king of Persia here, who's throwing a 6-month-long party, but probably not complete in its length, but it was a series of parties over 6 months for all the officials from the 127 provinces that they reigned from, to wine and dine, to show how great things were going, how rich he was, but also to get everyone on board with the coming war that he was planning to go up against Greece. That didn't go well. After the 6 months, he has another banquet, another feasting time of 7 days for those in the capital. And Queen Vashti is also having a party and a banquet for the women. Verse 10, on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Sarkis, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Well, it's a drunken decision, and in that moment, the queen says no. Like, why would she say no? Isn't she supposed to obey the king? Isn't she supposed to obey her husband? Isn't she supposed to submit? Well, the Bible does talk about submission, and we're not against that by any means, but it also says in Ephesians 5, submit as to the Lord. And so this wasn't that, but just in our lives, in our marriages, submission is not something you can command. It's something that you lay out, and each wife is to submit to their husband as unto the Lord. She knew it was probably not wise to go into a room full of drunken men. She knew that it was against the culture for her to go in unveiled. And so there was just many reasons why she had wisdom and the king had no wisdom. Well, the king didn't like this decision. He didn't take it well. And he was very angry. And so he gathers his wise men, verse 13, and he said to the wise men who knew the time, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him being Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. According to the law, what is to do be done to Queen Vashti, because she's not performed the command of King Ahasuerus, delivered by the eunuchs? Like, what can we do? Like, she's broken the law, and she didn't come when I called. Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's behavior will say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath and plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus. Let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province, in its own script, to every people, in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. So in the midst of all this foreign party, this foreign atmosphere, we have the sovereignty of God and the providence of God. God is sovereign over all, and he's working behind the scenes. God's not mentioned, as I talked about earlier. We see the free choices of men and of women, and yet God's going to be working in those choices to bring about something that ultimately is for the saving of the Jewish people. God remembered them. They're back in a place where they shouldn't have been, right? But they're there because they were exiled from Israel, and now some have been able to go back. Many stayed behind. And so God's message to them in the book of Esther is, I remember you, I care about you, and I still love you. And as you hear about this big party and these drunken decisions, there's consequences, but each of these acts ends up leading to the next step. And by having Vashti never before the king anymore, there's an opening. God's going to use that opening to bring up Esther. God's going to use Esther to save her people, his people. And so sometimes you don't know that God's working until you look back. Take some time, look back. See where and how God worked in and through your life, and trust him for the days to come. Confident that he's sovereign, he's in control, and the decisions you make, good, bad, and ugly, well, the good, rejoice, you're on the right track. The bad, know that he doesn't throw you away, but he brings you back. He gets you back on track. And out of the bad, out of the horrible and the pain and the suffering, those kind of times, he can make something good. It's a book where the Jewish people will come to know that God cares and loves for them. God cares and loves for you as well. Till next time, little by little.